Hi, I'm Swoop from Art by Swoop. I've been painting, paint oils, strictly in oils. I paint on canvas board, wood. Took my first art lesson when I was in high school. I took an oil painting class, and then I didn't paint again for probably 25, 30 years. I opened up a coffee house and decided to have artists show their art in the coffee house. And that re-sparked my interest in art. And I started creating again. It's encouraged by a lot of the artists that came through. And so I started painting again and did that. And it got me, enthused, I should say, with it. And, I've always had a love for art. I always visit a lot of museums and studied a lot of artists. Big fan of the greats like Picasso and Monet and Manet. But I like a lot of newer artists as well. There's a woman in the UK named Clara Bowen. She does wonderful plein air stuff. And a guy named Andrew Tisher, who I like. I watch them on YouTube, and he does a lot of plein air, and he has a lot of commissions, but a lot of landscapes. It's kind of what I like to do. I do a lot of landscapes, a lot of points of interest, places I've seen during my travels. Don't do many people. I don't do any portraits. I have done a couple just to play around with, but it's not really what I do. I like buildings, and I like landscapes and cityscapes and things like that. Sometimes I do some birds. But I did have a lot of time doing photography in between painting. So, and as people tell me, I like broken things because I did a lot of stuff with film, black and white film, and I liked things that were dilapidated, run down, things like that. So it's kind of the same thing with my paintings. I don't always paint a lot of things that everybody thinks is pretty, but I think things that interest me. So. I've never been like a permanent resident within a gallery. I've shown in galleries. I had some stuff in some member shows in the Paseo at the Paseo Center there, and I've had some things back in California, for like a specific show. I never really actually pursued being in a gallery specifically, other than entering shows and having things admitted, and then being there for a month. I had a friend tell me that he had some stuff in Street Smarts as a part of another show that was within Street Smarts. So I came to see his stuff, and I had heard about Street Smarts from a couple of friends prior to it opening, or it had just opened, but I had never had a chance to get down here. When I came down to Street Smarts, the first person I met was JR. He welcomed me right when I walked through the door, and it was just a good feeling. A lot of times you walk in places and sometimes you get greeted, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you walk around a gallery and you might have a question or two, but there's nobody really there to talk to or really ask you about anything. When I first walked through the door, JR greeted me, and it was really, really, really nice how he greeted me. And then I had a chance to walk around, and as I was walking around, I met the owner, Daryl, and welcoming and whatnot. And so I really, what I really liked was the variety of art, the quality of art, the variety of art, the multiple different price points, but the warm welcome that I got from JR and Daryl really made an impression on me. And so I decided to ask, JR asked me if I was an artist. I told him yes I was, and he asked me if he could see any of my work, and I had, of course I had some stuff on my phone, and he says, oh man, this is really good stuff, and really, he goes, I really like what you're doing. And I said, and that's when I decided to ask him, I said, well, how do you get into Street Smarts? He says, oh, talk to Daryl, he's the owner. So I had a chance to sit down and talk to Daryl and see some things, and I just, the vibe of the gallery and the people that are here were so welcoming that I really wanted to be in here. And so when I was accepted and to be a part of the gallery, it was a really a great feeling, and I just love being here. So, I was born and raised in Southern California. I grew up in near the Long Beach area in a little small town next to Long Beach called Cerritos. But like I said, I took a lesson in high school, one class, and then after high school, I went to college, and then I decided to go into law enforcement and spent 20 plus years in law enforcement. And after that, I opened a coffee house, and so in between there, in between college and coffee house, or between high school and coffee house, I did a lot of photography, but not much painting. I painted every once in a while, but not a lot. I didn't start painting again until after I opened my coffee house, and it was one of those things. It's just like somebody said, "Yeah, you used to paint. You should get back into it." So I went over to, I don't know, like Walmart or someplace like that, and bought a little cheap little easel, some cheap canvases and some paints, and started up again. And it was great because it was a time where it just gave me something to do other than run my business, right? Because anybody who runs a brick and mortar knows, you get the hours you put in and things you got to do like that. So sometimes you need an escape. And so when I would get home, that's when I would kind of paint and stuff like that. And then I really got into the art, the art, not society, but the movement in the Long Beach area. A friend of mine and myself, we started putting on art events, and art shows, and art walks, and things like that. And mostly for other artists, but then we started showing our stuff within that because, of course, we were hosting and things like that. And, that sparked a lot of interest amongst people that I didn't know about my art. At the time I was showing my paintings and my photography, and, started selling some of those things. So that's kind of when I really decided to let's give this a go. After I closed my coffee house, I decided, I got more free time now. Let me give this a go. So I started, painting more. And then when I moved to Oklahoma about 6 years ago, I really didn't have time to paint because I was here for a specific reason to kind of help out my folks. And so in between time helping them out and stuff, and when I had some downtime, I would start painting again. And I really didn't give it the effort I wanted at the time because I was so busy. Long story short, I got hurt. I couldn't do a lot of things. I was at home trying to rehab from my injury, and that's when I started putting in the hours just to give me something else to do other than go to PT. People talk about what it is to become a successful artist, and I think it's an individual thing. Some people define it as how well known they are, how much money they're making, things like that. I think success for me is more of a satisfaction thing. Technically, I would consider myself already successful in a sense because I paint things that I enjoy painting, and it sparks an interest in other people. To me, that's success, right? Would you consider yourself more successful if you made a lot more money, if you can make a living at this full time? Yeah, I think anytime you do anything, no matter what profession you go in, if it's feeding your family, how you're being housed based on that, well, you're successful in that realm. You might not be the most successful person in that industry, but you're successful in that realm. And I think, does art pay all my bills? No. Do I consider myself successful? Yeah, I have people that ask me to paint things. I have watched people come through the gallery and look at my things, and it sparks an interest in them, and that's all I need to do, or all I need within me to feel confident enough to continue to do this for more than just myself. I think the one time I realized that what I consider myself successful is I painted a painting that I really loved, and somebody bought it, and I really didn't. When it sold, I really didn't really want to sell it because I had put so much time into it, and I was so passionate about it, and I loved it. But purpose of it was to eventually sell it, and then it sold fairly quickly. So I didn't have it around the house very long. A lot of things I have, I've had for a little while, and I've been hanging on my wall for a while, and I got a chance to enjoy it. I never really got a chance to enjoy this painting, but somebody loved it so much they wanted it before it was dry. I had to put them off and say, you're gonna have to wait a few weeks at least for to be completely dry, and it can get it varnished and all stuff like that. So I think that's how I define success. I was doing photography and taking pictures, and a lot of people liked my pictures. I took them not for anybody else, I took them for myself, but you would show things to people, right? Same thing with my paintings. So, I paint things and show things to friends, and they go, oh, I love that, I love that. So, it got to a point where I don't ever know if there was specifically a defining moment when I wanted to be an artist, but there became a time when I was comfortable enough to call myself an artist, right? Because when you have people interested in your work, I mean, even as a kid, when I first did the one painting class, that's the first time I sold a painting. I sold a painting to a neighbor. Another kid liked something I did and asked her mom, could she buy it? And I had to come up with a price. And so, but I didn't sell anything for years. I didn't even try to sell anything for years. It was just one of those first time I guess I had a commission, right? But as far as like a specific defining moment, I really can't say that I could put my finger on it, but I do know that you feel when you have people that are interested in what you do and like what you do, even some of the stuff that you do that you're not really that fond of, I should say. I shouldn't say that fond of because you did it, you wanted to do it, but you don't think it's your best work. And then people say, well, I really like that. So that kind of gives you the self-esteem to feel like you are good enough to be in this business, because it is a business. But it's interesting. I have a friend who's done a lot of different types of art. He's a stone sculptor, and at one point in time, and he had a sculpture in his yard, and I said, oh, I love that, and he says, nah, it's broken. He says that piece that sticks out there was twice as long. And he says, but as I was chiseling it, it broke. But see, I loved it as it was. I never saw it before it broke, right? So I think that's the kind of feeling you get when sometimes you do things that necessarily you're not that fond of how it turned out, but somebody else loves it. And that gives you a feeling that, yeah, this is something I'm fairly good at, and this is a point in time where I can call myself an artist.